In this video, we'll look at question number 9 from GATE Biotechnology 2014 paper. The question is, the most plausible explanation for a sudden increase of the respiratory quotient RQ of a microbial culture is that option A, cells are dying, option B, yield of biomass is increasing, option C, the fermentation rate is increasing relative to respiration rate, and option D, the maintenance rate is decreasing. So, to answer the question, let's first define respiratory quotient and let's see how each of the given options influence respiratory quotient. So, for a given time period, the ratio of the quantity of carbon dioxide produced to the quantity of oxygen consumed is called respiratory quotient, which is denoted by RQ. It reflects several biological processes, like it represents oxidation of food or a substrate and reflects the metabolic rate of an organism. So, in general, for animals at rest, the respiratory quotient ranges between 0.1 and 0.9, and in humans, it's generally 0.85 at resting state. So, it also indicates the type of respiration observed in an organism. So, for example, if the respiratory quotient is lesser than or equal to 1, it indicates aerobic respiration where oxygen is consumed and nutrients are catabolized to carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So, it could also indicate photosynthesis in plants where oxygen is consumed and carbon dioxide is released. So, on the other hand, where the respiratory quotient is greater than 1, it could indicate anaerobic respiration where oxygen is not consumed, and it could also be indicative of the conversion of carbohydrates into fats. Let us now look at each one of the options given in our question to see which of them is associated with a sudden increase in the respiratory quotient. So, option A, cells are dying. So, cellular death might lead to decrease in metabolic activity rather than an increase. So, as the cells die, their metabolic processes, including respiration or fermentation or any process that the cell undergoes, it's likely to decline. So, it would not align with an increase in respiratory quotient. So, in dying cells, the overall metabolic activity decreases, which would not result in a sudden increase in the production of carbon dioxide related to oxygen consumption, and hence there would not be an increase in respiratory quotient. So, option A, cells are dying, is not the correct answer to the question. And then option B, yield of biomass is increasing. So, the biomass yield refers to the production of cellular material, and it is typically associated with the growth phase of a microbial culture. So, an increase in biomass yield is more likely to be associated with an increase in cell growth and reproduction, which is generally accompanied by increased respiration rather than fermentation. So, higher biomass production would usually lead to increase in oxygen consumption rather than a sudden increase in the production of carbon dioxide. So, it would still be balanced and it would not just lead to a sudden increase. So, the respiratory quotient would still be a bit less. So, this is not the correct option to the question either. Further, we have option C, the fermentation rate is increasing relative to respiration rate. So, let's look about fermentation versus respiration. So, fermentation is an anaerobic process that occurs in the absence of oxygen. So, it involves the breakdown of organic compounds to produce energy and end products such as acids, alcohols, or gases. So, respiration, on the other hand, is an aerobic process that occurs in the presence of oxygen and is more efficient in terms of energy production. So, if there is a sudden increase in the respiratory quotient in a microbial culture, it suggests that the production of carbon dioxide is higher than the consumption of oxygen. So, this shift is indicative of an increased reliance of fermentation relative to aerobic respiration. So, it indicates that fermentation, anaerobic respiration, is happening as opposed to aerobic respiration. So, when there's an increase in respiratory quotient, it indicates that the fermentation rate is increasing and the respiratory rate is low. So, an increase in fermentation rate may occur due to changes in the environment of the microbial culture, like the availability of the substrate or the metabolic conditions. So, it could also be a response to nutrient limitations, changes in pH, or other environmental factors that favor anaerobic metabolism, which is fermentation. So, in summary, a sudden increase in respiratory quotient suggests a shift in the microbial culture's metabolism with a higher emphasis on fermentation compared to aerobic respiration. So, this could be due to various factors affecting the culture conditions, leading to a change in the balance between fermentation and respiration rates. So, a sudden increase in the respiratory quotient would be indicative of fermentation. So, option C would be the correct answer to our question. So we still have one option, which is the maintenance rate is decreasing. So the maintenance rate generally refers to the energy required for the basic physiological functions of the cells, like maintaining the cellular integrity and performing essential activities for the cell to survive. So a decrease in maintenance rate might lead to a decrease in overall survival and the decrease in the overall metabolic activity, including respiration or fermentation. So it is less likely to result in a sudden increase in respiratory quotient. So changes in maintenance rate are not typically associated with a shift in balance between fermentation and respiration. So it could just lead to a decrease in the respiratory quotient rather than sudden increase in the respiratory quotient. So option D is not the answer to the question. So, like we just saw in the slides, the most plausible explanation for sudden increase in the respiratory quotient of a microbial culture is that the fermentation rate is increasing relative to respiration rate. So, that answers our question. Thank you.